So welcome to the Node.js Next 10 meeting for May 10th, 2021. We'll follow the agenda that we had tagged in the issue. And the issue was number 66, if anybody wants to go look for that one. Right, so we have a couple things on the issue. One was the survey to get feedback from the needs of the Node.js constituencies, and we have that data, so I think we should spend some time going through that. We also have on the agenda the key technical areas brainstorm, which we generated a list, and we've got some more feedback from collaborators because we posted it to collaborators, so that's great. And then we have the next 10 years of collaborators, but I think probably the first two will keep us busy for the meeting. Does that sound good to everybody? So I'm going to bring up the pull request, which I opened, and we can take a look at that survey data. So let me share the screen. And here we go. So there's two files here. One is the survey results, the sort of raw survey results. So let me open that up if I can. Is there a way to do that? No, I didn't want to do that. I just want to open that. Am I going to be able to do this easily? I should be able to. Maybe view file. Ah, here we go. Okay. So Rachel put this together for us, which was great. The first thing is it, thanks to everybody who participated, because we've got over 2,800 responses, which is really fantastic. Shows the level of interest in this and sort of that's really good. So the first question we had was like, which constituencies do you identify with? And it seems like we got a pretty good representation across the board, from direct end users at 60%, application operators at 40%, application developers 90%. Obviously, there's overlap. People identified with multiple library package authors. Node.js core maintainers was a smaller number, and organizations with investment in Node.js was also a smaller number, but actually I think those are also pretty good numbers. If you look at like how many core maintainers we have, that's expected to be a smaller number. And even when you look at an organization, there's maybe going to be fewer of those. So that actually I think is a pretty good coverage. Now the follow-on question was like, okay, did we miss any constituencies? And it sounds, if we looked at that, we did get about 5% of people who said we're not in one of those, and 95%. So we got, I think, pretty decent. But maybe it's worthwhile now flipping over to look at what we had a question which was like, if you weren't part of these, which ones were you? So let's maybe why don't we pop over to that one and take a look to see.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, go ahead.
We promote folks, please.
Okay, thank you. Let me.
If you'd like to make me co-host, I can keep an eye on it if you like.
I will do that. I'll go back and I will promote Tierney, and then I will also make you co-host. Okay, thank you. I'll go back and look at the survey questions to say, now where was that? Right, so what needs, okay, no, wait a sec. So where I thought we had this,
I think
okay.
It's in that doc. It's like page 3, the other doc.
The other doc. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it says sheet 2, question 3, elaboration. And it says if you answered yes to question 2, please provide more details on which constituency you belong to.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the cons cutoff got me. So. Okay, let me just see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Is that any bigger? So these were the constituencies which people felt we didn't cover in the other areas. So we can kind of say service and infrastructure providers, which we should go back and let's see, we can go back and say, what were the ones? Okay, maybe if I slip there and then.
Our intent of covering that was in the, let me go back to the other, it's organizations with investment, I thought. Like, wasn't that what we originally thought that would cover, would be like the AWSs of the world or something, you know?
It's, it could, I guess it's like, you know, you could be an investment. I think the way I read that one a little bit though was like, hey, I'm a company and I'm actually investing in Node as a strategic part of my, you know, what I'm going to run my business on. That I can see is a little different than I'm operating a cloud-based infrastructure, a cloud offering. So that might be worth. We can kind of go through them, but yeah, that one. Direct end users, application, although application operators, yeah, I guess that's still a little bit different, isn't it? Okay, well, once we go through, maybe we can come back and look at what we missed all over and whether we want to add stuff. So the next one is students.
That stands out to me. We definitely didn't cover that because there was another one later further down that said teaching node, which I feel like education maybe would be
right
constituency there that would sort of group their needs, right? Because I imagine teachers and students sort of want the same sort of support and resources.
Right. Yeah. So basically, and I guess they could be, you know, under developers or authors, but it does seem like, you know, people learning is maybe, yeah, yep. I can easily see. Okay, so that's could be one to add. Managing teams, managed team that does Node.js development. Just flipping back to where that might fit.
Maybe I'm reading into it, but I'm guessing they're saying like, well, I'm a manager, not an actual application developer or operator, or one of the other ones. I manage people who are that. I'm not entirely sure we would need to separate that out, right? Because the assumption would be that their goal, while they may take a different view on the topic, their goal would be to best support their application developers or, you know, library authors on their team. So in theory, they should have the same goals and same needs.
Right, and I almost kind of see it as it could fit in the organizations with investments as well, right? Like that's sort of if there's non-development things that the managers would worry about, that's kind of where we would cover. I think that could be covered as well. Okay, let's keep looking. Nothing view. Game developers. Not sure we really broke out developers by different location, by different types of apps or anything, right? Because so students who are learning.
I would sort of consider that part of application development, but I have to say, from the game developers I've talked to, they don't necessarily see themselves in the same bucket as like a web service, you know,
as enterprise developers.
Yeah, or any of the things we've listed. I imagine that might be just a self, like how they see themselves, you know,
right?
The greater scheme, but.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Students who are learning. So I guess that we talked. That one was one we talked a little bit about. An avid fan. Yeah, that one it's like, it's also interesting. Is there something separate there? Application security.
That one we maybe missed on. I don't know. There's a whole like the lens of I'm a security engineer. I just so happen to have some, folks using Node that I support, like might be a miss on our constituencies list.
Right. Do they end up being part of the application operators, or?
It's hard to say. I imagine it depends on the company. When I think of at Netflix, the way I think of this, we have, so like my team sort of spreads a few of these, and then we interact separately with security teams, and the security teams happen to support JavaScript engineers because they have to, because we run JavaScript.
Right.
But they also support, our Java ecosystem. They support a bunch of other like cloud security aspects that have nothing to do with Node, right? So they're sort of this umbrella that spans a lot of different things. And I wouldn't, like, if I was thinking about where I would have slotted some of those folks in this constituency list, I don't know that they would fit anywhere other than maybe organizations with investment. But I would see that as sort of just because they're part of Netflix, not because it's actually fitting their role in the ecosystem.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, because like same for us, like we have, groups who basically manage the security reporting and CVEs and all that. So it potentially could fit under the organizations with investments in Node, but it might be big enough to have as a separate constituency in terms of the security practitioners, because we do generate like the CVEs and stuff for that kind of the people managing that part of the work specifically.
Yeah, and if we think about the like collab space we're kicking off, that is actually the point there, is that we haven't reached some of those types of folks through the existing channels.
Right.
And we think there's value there. So maybe calling that out on the project. I know I wish Mary was here, because I know we had talked about trying to figure out how to get more involved in triaging and supporting the security aspects, and it was brought up sort of as a partnership that we might engage with our security teams, and then figure out how to integrate with the Node ecosystem. And to me, just having that conversation makes it, I think, pretty clear that there is another constituency, because otherwise we would have just said, oh, okay, yeah, we'll do it, as sort of the Node group, but that wasn't quite enough, I think. So
can you hear me? Hey,
yeah.
Sorry. I've been struggling for 20 minutes to get my mic to work. I apologize for interrupting.
No problem. Okay, no, that's good. So yeah, no, I'm leaning. Let's get through the rest of the list, but then it sounds like we probably have a few to add. So developers from Africa. So we haven't actually based things geography wise either. Is that something we would want to consider? Different requirements for different geographies? Or
one of the main things I would think out of this answer, and there was, I think, one other one that related to geography, but would be, where are our users? Because that might determine language support, that might determine, certain things like out of the docs and out of the content we might produce. Right. They have a really strong presence. Like, for example, I know I chatted with some folks who were building some stuff in China, and the Chinese community had totally forked the Express docs because there wasn't enough support for the, what needed to be done there in the Chinese language specific version. And, if there's similar endeavors in the Node project, like knowing that would be good. Whether or not that's a constituency as we've defined it, I kind of don't think so. I think that's just we need to be considerate of our regional.
Right.
The one caveat I'd say there is that there are going to be certain things that are represented in different constituencies, especially ones that are not, like North American or Eurocentric, specifically like China is going to have certain, firewall things that come up, and that might be impactful to them. Africa is going to have different like compute needs, and also there's a lot more people who are starting and growing, rather than people who are, or like rather than a majority of like in the US like senior or mid-level developers. And so making like there is going to be a correlation to that, and I think making one potential benefit to collecting that information is seeing both like survivorship bias and seeing what areas we're missing that we might not be collecting the input on, and which would allow us to go and get that information more targeted.
I do wonder though if it's like, is it a separate developer constituency, or should we like Wes was saying, it's like
So-
maybe people have the same needs, just we need to make sure that we cover them.
So I agree, and I think part of what I'm saying is, I agree that it's not a separate developer constituency. What I think it is it's I assume y'all have seen the World War II airplane where there's the survivorship bias, and like certain areas of the plane are never shot or don't ever come back with bullet holes, because when those areas get shot, they get cut off and the plane doesn't come back. It very much feels like that, in that having that data and knowing, hey, we're if we're talking to someone in Africa or someone in China or someone in Russia or wherever, making sure that we're actually hearing from a non-trivial part of the people there helps us ensure that what we're looking for in the constituencies is actually reflecting the global needs rather than the needs just
Right.
in North America, because there might be different needs. Like, I think we will probably see higher Windows usage in Africa than we will in America. Like there's going to be less people using Linux and Mac in Africa than there will be in America. And so that there will be a disproportionate number or a disproportionate bias outside of,
Right.
Africa to those other systems, whereas that might not be as well represented if we don't make sure we're actually doing additional outreach, make sure we're getting coverage for Africa or other countries, like different subject, different country, but same problem.
Right.
So
Yeah, okay.
I don't
Sorry, go
know
ahead.
if I don't know if it means we should do additional work right now, but I do think that that's a good thing to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that sort of we'll keep going. So we talked about submitted a few PRs that were merged core, but don't consider myself a core maintainer. So I'm not sure that one's a different, like, probably they still follow into a developer, or I guess it could be somebody like people trying to join the Node.js project or ramping up. I don't know if that's something we'd want to call out as a separate.
I don't think so. I mean, the one thing I'll say about core maintainers is it's not necessarily inclusive of working groups, although it does say like working groups. So, that's the only caveat I'd say there, but I don't think it needs to be a
You
distinct.
might want to reword that one.
Yeah, I agree.
Like it's because that core maintainers actually has perhaps maybe it should be like Node.js maintainers or Node.js contributors or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree
Okay.
with that.
That's a good. Okay. Requirements management. That I don't think I quite understand. Does anybody else have any?
It almost sounds like an answer to another question.
Right,
Mm.
okay, that could be true. Throw new air, herald world. I don't think that's one I can think of. I guess this one about India is maybe related to like the, developers from Africa. So sort of that slice that we were, or at perspective we were talking about just a little bit before. Founder think tank. I don't know, that seems fairly specific to me. I would leave that covered as some of the others that we already have, right? In terms of like, an organization that's got an investment is probably the closest.
Yeah.
The next one, data analytics. It's like you said, possibly something maybe to a different question. Application, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say on that one, is that potentially an area that we've left out around like AI/ML as a use case? Is that potentially something that we haven't considered?
I would
You mean,
hesitate
yeah.
to go too specific. So like I was thinking the same kind of thing for the one, well, a couple of the ones up further up were like, yeah, I could see how maybe it's slightly different, but if we make a list of 30 constituencies and half of them you
Right.
can't difference between, like, I don't think there's a lot of value there. And I
No.
think ML, data analytics, all that kind of stuff, you're really still fitting it into an application developer role. It's just that your application so happens to be doing data analytics. And I don't think we should go that deep. I think we should figure out how to like word the other constituencies so that it's clear that that role actually just fits under the, the umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
could see it coming out through like the other thing we have on the agenda is looking at strategic technology areas. I could see it coming out as one of those. And then, when you look at the constituencies through the lens, so say you say, supporting AI/ML with JavaScript is key to the success of Node. You can then look through that lens to say, okay, what does that mean to developers? What does that mean to organizations who have investments in Node? And that might be rather than slicing up the constituencies, because that starts to mix the two of them together a bit is kind of where I'm going.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sounds good.
Application developer. Well, I think we have application developer covered. Right, that's application developer. Yeah. Alternative JavaScript runtime maintainer.
I think these are just edges that,
Yeah.
like, that's not actually a constituency. Actually, I would say this person just self-identified as not a Node constituency because if you're on a different JavaScript runtime, that's not Node, that's different,
Yeah, the only way I could see is like if it was Chakra or, Spider Monkey. But again, it's pretty specific. It's a pretty
Very
small
limited set of people. Yeah.
Go ahead. And
I mean, there's also like Deno and JS, whatever. Miles made his own that was like, a small JavaScript runtime, but it's not enough people if it's not a constituency that we build to. And like also
yeah,
if we're building things for people, we're not building things for the runtimes. So
right.
like to Wes's
Like,
point.
right. If it's in that category, then they've explicitly said, well, I'm using something else. So
Yep.
And the other one is small enough. So yeah, I think teaching Node at university level, I think we talked a bit about that like maybe we should come up with something for education. So
Yeah, I agree with that. I have a friend who's an Amazon person who apparently is in one of the first courses at like, or was in the first course at the college in Washington, who their teaching Node is a part of that course. And so, yeah, I think that we're gonna maybe, as a refresh of their old Java, C++, CS courses. So I think we might start seeing this more, and that's probably a good thing to plan for the next 10 years.
Yeah, education seems like yeah. API custom service. Again, I'm kind of thinking that strays more into the technologies versus constituencies.
I think it's just an application developer. Like,
Right.
That's what that was supposed to cover.
That's what I think. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Kind of like they're covered by an application developer, and then when we look through the lens of technologies, it may be that like supporting API services is a strategic thing or not. But yeah. Instrumentation developers working to create application runtime diagnostic tools.
So this would be like a company producing a runtime monitoring tooling, right?
Yeah.
Library author, right? I mean, that like almost every single one of those is built as a library you install into your application. So
yeah. I'd say either library author or enterprise, because that's going to be a giant company using Node, and like fundamentally it's not substantially different than like what you would do at Netflix. They're just, the thing you're doing is just what they sell.
Yeah, it's like APMs though. It is interesting because like there's features which I would say are targeted at, I guess maybe that I would say it's more application operators than like
it's application operator as a business. Yeah, I mean, that's fair.
Because it's things like the async local storage and even async hooks and the things around around the debuggability and all that is kind of a different audience. But yeah, maybe it's that the APMs are really like a company who's providing something to that application operator audience.
yeah, that's how I see it. It's just what you said. I think if we're going, all of those things that you mentioned that have become platform, features, it just so happens that the APM is one of the driving forces because that's their business. But like application authors, application operators all heavily use that stuff now, and it's
right.
Only growing more. And I don't think people see that as only serving the APM vendors. Like we use that all the time, and we don't necessarily use the APM products, right? Like, and people write their own custom things on top of it as an application developer as they see fit. So I think it serves that constituency actually more directly even than the APM vendors.
Right. It's like you can, because there's a whole bunch of application development tools as well. And you could make the same argument for calling out, well, like people who do build tools for application developers, right? And it's probably better to say, well, no, the people we're serving are the operators and the developers. There happen to be companies who build tools for them. And they may be the ones who are most active in helping us understand what the operators and the developers need or want, but it's not necessarily a completely separate thing.
The one additional caveat I might have there is a smaller but different constituency than APMs, where it's people who are building this kind of tooling that is not built on Node, but it is something Node would hook into, and I don't know if that is distinct. So something like open tracing or whatever it's called, that kind of stuff might be distinct, but I have a feeling Wes probably has a stronger feeling on where that would fit than I do.
I mean, I think it's a good point, and we leverage that, and I think the way we do it is just as like, again, library and operator view, like library author and operator view. It's not going to be anything meaningfully different than those two constituencies would already represent, right? Like, so I think it's safe to say that could actually, to Michael's point earlier about the other things, is that could be just a technology. Maybe we say a technology that we think is worth, supporting and investing in would be, tracing hooks, right? Or something,
Yeah.
and then it just so happens that serves 2 or 3 different constituencies, but I don't think those folks would see themselves outside of that box in the constituency.
It comes back to, we could slice this up, but if we get to 30, it's not useful, right? So I come from it's the operators we're really trying to serve. There's some other people who will be trying to help them, but we don't want to necessarily say application operators and then people who help application operators and then application developers and people who help application developers, right? So I think even though that they might be slightly different, it's like, let's keep it to a smaller set, makes sense from that perspective, and leave them together is kind of where I'm coming from. Okay. So instrumentation developers. So yeah, I think we'll see very much from some of the other data that will be pretty strongly recommended as a need. So I don't think we're going to forget that either.
Yeah.
Command line tools and applications. And I think later on we have scripting users as well.
I strongly believe this fits into library authors. The CLI tooling author workflows are really, really, really similar to most of the library author, constituency needs.
So maybe we should we might want to just expand that description to make that clear if it's somebody looked at and says, I don't think I fit there, right? So
yeah,
because we got 2 comments on that front, so maybe expanding to say including scripting users or something like that, right? Now, I guess purely, so if we looked at command line tools and applications, that's one thing. I'm not sure that covers scripting users quite as well, though, because like if I want to write myself a quick script, I'm not writing a library, but I actually want to do something, and instead of writing it in Bash, I'm going to write it in Node.
Oh, so that would be the end user, right? That would be our end user constituency. Okay, yeah, I see where you're going there. I didn't think about it in that way. I thought of it as writing a script that you publish, but yeah.
Right. Well, the first one fit into that, like the command line tools and applications fits that very nicely. The other one a little bit less. But then the direct end users, install node, run tool, maybe that one again, write scripts. Is that, I guess it comes down to is that a big enough thing to call out as its own?
I don't think so. Personally,
I guess it's like,
we add one-off scripts or something as one of the list items in that parenthetical, like then we're probably covered.
Because what else? Like direct end users, yeah, you're either running something else or you're writing some scripts. I mean, run tool, one-off scripts. Okay, so maybe we add that to that description that covers that one.
One thing you might want to be clear when you say one-off scripts, there's 2 different use cases we saw, especially since for the ESM loader, we don't support extensionless files. There are people who want to run things without extensions and people who are fine running things with extensions. And there is a very clear divide actually on this.
What do you mean with extensions?
So
JS, I assume.
Yeah, when you use the ES module loader due to reasons, particularly WebAssembly reasons and compatibility, we remove the ability for you to just load a file without an extension.
Right, like it needs an MJS or something like that.
Or JS or CJS. It doesn't matter what, but it's got to have something.
Yep.
And that is one of the main complaints that people have about it, and they don't like that we removed it because WebAssembly forward compatibility.
I have a question. Do you see, having dealt with those folks and like tried to understand their needs, do you see them more as end users, or do you see them fitting into one of these other constituencies? Like when they come with that need, presumably they have these stronger opinions from doing something in the ecosystem. Like what do they fit mostly in?
So usually they are people, a little bit of both, unfortunately. It's when you fit in both categories, you start to fall apart. If you're just a direct person running a different author's application, we don't see complaints. However, if you are the author of the application and you want to distribute it without having an extension, we do see complaints because they want to be able to distribute single files rather than packages. That is where it falls apart.
So it sounds to me like maybe we should make sure the library author use case covers non-traditional deployment methods of some sort, right? So really what you're saying there is they're a library author and they're not publishing to NPM where some of this stuff is covered. They're like shipping a file in a tarball, or like, well, I guess that's basically what NPM does. I don't know, some other, like they put it on and you curl bash it or something, right? Like what, like, is that covered in our...
Yeah, usually it's going to be things like shell utilities that you have in your like .bash customization repos and stuff like that. There are some other strong opinionated folks, but they seem to be vocal, but a minority. Yeah.
Okay, so I see that, to be honest, I see that like it's in my home directory repo. I see that as end user, and I fit into that category. I have quite a bunch of things that are just node scripts in my, bash profile. But then I see the other aspect that you were describing, which is people who want to distribute it to, to others. As the library author, again, even if they don't fit into the traditional one, which is like publishing to the NPM registry, which I think is a valid use case in some ecosystems.
I'd agree. We just need to be clear about the separation.
Okay, so I think that's, we're thinking we just, again, maybe we try and make sure we improve our descriptions to cover people, so they see they're in those two. Decision maker on use of technologies, CTO, technical executive. I kind of see those two as organizations with investment in Node.js.
The one thing I'll say is I know I hate it, but I know that the IT decision maker thing is like still huge, and it's basically how a lot of technology gets bought. And if we don't have a category that I guess relatively directly associates that kind of person is different than like a Node.js developer.
Well, right, but we've got this one right here, which is organizations with an investment in Node.js. So this is meant to be the non-developer portion, like,
Okay.
as an organization, we bought into Node and I'm making strategic decisions as the CTO, as the architect, as the whatever.
Perhaps we want to list roles there as well, in addition to like the actual organization type, since it is like as X person who's not necessarily a direct like JavaScript node dev,
Right.
as like their full-time thing, it might be worth it to also list those there.
Yeah, I think,
So it's
the takeaway I have from here is that at least a couple of them need a little bit more listed in their little parentheticals.
Yep.
Right? So here we just throw in IT decision maker / CTO or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be like organizations and so exactly. Let's like, if we factor those two things in there, is a clearly like in terms of the non-developer aspect. Okay, and I'm thinking that, we're probably on this first question going to pretty much use our time. We might spend a little bit of time working on what that revisions to these would be while it's fresh. Okay, scripting users, we already talked about. Good Morgan. Support and issues analysis. So I think that's operators in my mind. And then standards groups.
Standards groups to me might be something we want to call out in the Node core collaborators aspect and just say like anytime it's a, you know, specification level thing that Node would seek to implement or collaborate on with the standards body, like that to me would fit most closely there.
But they are, I don't know, that one almost does seem slightly different, like a different group of people. Like the people who work on standards, they may not actually be developers who implement things.
Would that be something like who link, I don't know, some kind of the W3C that will try to bring or to follow the JavaScript standard to import into Node.js, maybe? So which is maybe not only including people which are really working into Node core, but maybe just people who think that fetch would be great to be in Node or don't know which other stuff. Maybe it's, for me, I understand it like that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I understand it the same way, but I think that with our expanded, we talked a little bit earlier about changing the one group from Node core contributors or something to whatever the wording we changed, we were going to change that. I think should cover it. And if not, we should work to make sure that it does, because I think no matter what, in the end, the goal is to have a collaboration between what is built in Node and what is specified in, you know, TC39 or, you know, W3C. And if it makes sense to have a collaboration there, I think the group that is being served is really the like people working on Node, right? It's making sure that the spec is going to work in Node. It's making sure that, you know, maybe the special things that about Node that might make, you know, sense going back up the ladder and being, you know, in the spec or implemented in the browser also makes sense.
True. That's exactly what I was going to say, because I don't think we have people also which work in Node which try to bring back information on the other way to W3C or TC39 or stuff like that. It's mostly coming from the browser side to Node.js and not on the other side.
We have some people like the OpenJS has a standards working group. But
okay, I wasn't aware of that. Okay.
but not, I'm not saying that we're doing everything we should, but more than we used to. That I still worry that we're going to forget about them if we just say, because like the core collaborators, they couldn't, you know, it's sort of like the standards, and what this happened a while back is kind of like the standards groups did their own thing. The core collaborators did their own thing. And we didn't think about the standards groups. And I'm not sure who's serving who, right? In terms of your, but I
think it's a bit symbiotic. It's not one
right.
The other.
Well, I know. So, but I'm just still thinking they're different enough. But I'm not sure whether, like, again, you know, comes back to we don't want 30, right? So let's. What I propose now, we have 9 minutes. So having just gone through this, I think I propose we go here and say, okay, what do we want to add? And what do we want to tweak, and take a few notes on that. So let me just see if I can get a doc to do that in.
Do we just want to use the meeting doc? I have the minutes here.
Oh, yeah. That perfect. Yeah, okay.
There's
so let me go back to this one right here. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So let's, we wanted to add students' education.
I would say if we structured it like some of the others and we just said, you know, education.
Yeah.
And put underneath it, you know, teachers, students, curriculum, you know, I think just in general, like university programs would be a really interesting constituency. Like I know I follow a fair number of folks on Twitter who are just educators trying to figure out how to structure their comp sci programs. And it's like, choosing Node versus Java or whatever as the platform, I think would be an interesting lens to look at,
Even
there.
certifications fit into that.
Yeah.
It could.
So like that would be one. So education, teacher, student certifications, programs to help people load, so basically it's programs to help people learn Node.js. Maybe it should start with that. Or I don't know if no.
Should be split it between really education as a school and university, and people who try to learn, maybe they want to change from one job to another, because it's not really the same target. On one side, it will be, let's say, a bootcamp or 2-3 months really to learn into one technology. On the other side, in a school or university, they will have an overall on multiple technology, framework, and language. So for me, I think it's not really exactly the same between those two kind of people.
It still comes down to, though, I don't think we want too many categories. So just like there's lots of application developers, some do, we could cut that into 5 categories. I'd kind of argue to have a single education category here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a like boot camps and stuff are a subset. Also, the college and universities outside of the direct comp sci teaching, there's a lot of other stuff that comprises that 4 years, which fills that out. Like it's not 4 years of Node and JavaScript learning, right?
Yeah.
So is that a nice, like, for a description? So teacher, students, programs to help people learn Node.js.
Yeah.
Does it need to have more than that, or is that good?
Did we lose the certification?
Well, yeah, I didn't know whether calling that, should I just leave that in, like teachers, because teachers and students are kind of people, and then there's programs to help people Node.js, learn Node.js, and that would be like, I wondered if maybe certifications was just like a specific instance of programs to help people learn Node.js.
It's slightly different though, right? Because it's
Yeah.
the idea of a
It's the
certification.
validation of knowledge.
Yeah, true.
That's the right wording, validation, which I think is,
So maybe that's fine. Like if we're good, teacher, students, certifications, programs to help people reduce.
The one concern I have there is if people have some kind of Node.js certification, they might self-select into that when that's not necessarily what we're looking for in that. So are we looking for people operating those programs, like certification programs, or are we looking for people who have taken them?
How about I put it like this and then say certification programs?
I actually think it should cover both. So my thinking on that is,
Okay.
what we would want to provide is validation to employers, to college programs, to all sorts of things that people learned, the content. And so whether or not so it might be that a certification provider comes to the project and says, here's the certification test I'm planning on doing. Is it good? Right. And that's one aspect. And then having, it verified by the core, the Node core, like could be a service that we, I say service, I just thinking, out loud here, but the idea would be that we want to make sure those, people aren't providing scam certifications.
Right.
Like, it would be a valid thing for the us to say we help with. Also, on the other side, somebody saying, I want to validate to my employer that I learned Node, right? And that's two sides of the same coin, because, we might say, well, we worked with the OpenJS Foundation to validate the certification process. That means it's good. That is value both to the person taking the certification and the person providing the certification. So it seems to me to fit right under nicely, together.
So does this fit like teachers, students, programs to help people learn Node.js, programs to help people learn Node.js, programs to help people demonstrate capability? And then like certifications is an example of that.
The other thing, I'd put a parenthetical after programs to help people learn Node.js as like college uni slash boot camps and like etc.
Like that?
Yeah, just to make sure that we're like communicating what we mean by that.
And maybe we could just have at least one, maybe two less of the word programs. Because it
Yeah,
reads a little bit programs. I don't know how to restructure it, but
Sure. I'll take a cut when I'll put a PR in, and I'll take a cut at doing that. We only have 3 minutes, so let's security practitioners. So this is like people who manage the security. Posture, or what do we?
Could it be people who are involved in the life cycle of security issues? Because it's not just that they necessarily manage it; it's also people who respond to security issues for companies, from like a PR, everything from a like incident response to actual code to PR involvement. Like I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff involved in the life cycle of responding to security incidents.
Something like that. People involved in the life cycle of security issues, incident response, CV scanning, remediation.
I think we should probably throw in here legal and PR as well. I mean, these are all aspects when you have a security incident that might come into play.
Do we include people doing pen test and stuff like that into security issue, or is it a separate stuff? Because after all, I hope in most of the case that it's people doing pen testing which first found the issue and not a black hat. So
yeah, I agree, that would fit in here in my opinion.
So like penetration. Yeah, and that's like, because like part of the programs we have to let people report issues and through HackerOne and stuff fits into that. So yeah, that's okay. And we're out of time. So if people can remember, like there was a few notes about we want to expand on some ones as well. If you can remember and just jot some notes in there. I'll do my best to remember as well later on today, but if you can add your thoughts, I'll then take that and put it into a PR as a revision based, a first revision based on the feedback we got here. And I guess next time we will continue on looking at the rest of the survey data, but that was, I think, a really good discussion, some really good feedback. And, again, if anybody's watching who participated in the survey, thank you very much for doing so. Otherwise, we'll see everybody in the next meeting in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Bye.